Hey, everybody. Hello, Monday. Welcome to Mental Health Monday. I am Dr. Alicia with Coaching with Dr. Alicia. You see this here, but you also see me and my wonderful guest. We are back this month, the month of February, to talk about how we're going to become the resistance. We are dealing with coping strategies for emotional well-being in the time of turmoil. And listen, this has been a monthly event where I have taken upon myself to, on a Monday, to talk about mental health and how it relates to all of these changes happening too fast. With someone in the chat mentioned too much, too fast. Yes, resistance would be wonderful if some of us are resisting some of the things that we're seeing that doesn't sit well with us nowadays in our political world. So I just want to say before we begin that this is not a political show. I am not a political analyst by no means. Do I have a background in political thought and all of that? But I am an intelligent person. I am educated, and I do understand what mental health looks like. And all of the people here today, who I will introduce you in a second, they also understand what sound mental health seems to be. So let me introduce my guest here. I have Dr. Buster Ogbuagu, who is over here. He is a historian. He is a social worker. Wait, let me say it first. First of all, we all Black first, right? But for Dr. Ogbuagu, he is a social worker first. Second, then he is a historian, and he is also a political, a policy teacher at our university. So I want to introduce Dr. Ogbuagu. And then underneath me here is one of our new...
Sorry, Dr. Alicia. Mm-hmm. I am also a sociologist and anthropologist.
Yes. Sociologist and anthropologist. So he's coming with a wealth of information, plus he's intelligent. So he's coming with a great wealth of information. And you can hear from his accent and his name. He is from Nigeria, by way of Canada, I think. And he is here to talk to us. Yes, this administration has become unhinged, and we are talking about that today. Below me here is Mr. Cleo Manago, and he is a cultural analyst and an anthropologist. You can correct me if I'm wrong. Introduce yourself.
A behavioral health analyst and a cultural health.
Yes. Okay, behavioral health analyst and cultural anthropologist. And I know he does some really good work in our community on the East Coast. Welcome, Mr. Cleo. He's our surprise guest.
Thank you very much.
And yes, and I also invited my husband on here. I told him he can come on here. We can put our boxing gloves on and box it out for tonight. And but he's coming. He's busy. He's away traveling. And so if he gets a chance to join us, he's always welcome to come on, of course. And you know, last but not least, my ace coon boon, my one of my besties is Dr. Cris. I call her Dr. Cris because she's got 2 PhDs, one in clinical psychology. Hello. She knows about mental health. And she's got another PhD in diversity and leadership.
Organizational psychology.
And she did her dissertation on diversity. Okay, so why am I telling you all about our backgrounds? Because I think this is very important. You guys need to know who we are and what we are and where we come from. We're not just talking. We're not armchair therapists here. We are people who have studied, who have done the work, and we are people who have, in a way, feel like we can help to not only help ourselves out in terms of how to make sense of what we see politically, and also how we can kind of deconstruct, if I should take one of Dr. Ogbuagu's words, deconstruct what we can do about it. What part of this that we see, should we shrug our shoulders and walk away and just live our lives in a tunnel? But what part of this is a signal that we need to be part of the resistance? How do we negotiate our day-to-day lives and all the things we have to deal with today, but at the same time, look at the world and seeing what's happening? What do we do with the energy that's formed in us in terms of resisting some of the things that we see that are problematic? And There are plenty of things problematic. I will get into it today, but before we begin, I would like to, I guess we do have a guest. But anyway, before we begin, I want to start here. That's my very first question for today. All of the things that we see laid out, what do we do in terms of our mental health? How do we deal with our day-to-day issues at the same time looking at what we see in the world and saying, okay, how do I voice myself to become part of the resistance? I think that we should start with Dr. Ogbuagu. Please tell us what you suggest we need to do to make a sense of all of this senseless things and people becoming unhinged.
Thank you, Dr. Alicia. Among the Igbo of Nigeria, they say if a kid who wouldn't let his mom sleep is not going to sleep either, because the kid has to be awake to bother mom, and while he's awake, he's not sleeping. And one quote from Ronald Reagan, you know how much I love the man, that I actually admire, is that he said that peace is not necessarily the absence of war. So to that extent, tell me what you would do if somebody's behavior is inimical to your very existence. Do you turn the other cheek? Or do you fight to survive? When you are pushed to the wall, what do you do? Many of us who are transnational chose this country for the ideals that have existed for 246 years. But suddenly it appears that we just scored a ticket on the Titanic. And this ship that is trying to sink has my children, has my grandchildren. And heck, I come from Africa, I come from a warrior clan. So I have to survive. And right now that we are pushed to the wall, the only way I can ascertain my survival is to fight for my life. So how do you deal with resistance? Like I told you, I was a child soldier in Nigeria. I came to Canada as a refugee with 2 duffel bags. So every single thing that needed to have been done to me to destroy me have already come and gone. So for those of us who are immersed in conflict in our lives, this is business as usual. And then again, aside from that, how about the others who do not have as much power or intellectual property to defend themselves? Institutions and nations have soldiers, because not everybody can go to the war front. So we become the bastion of this resistance. Yes, it's 4 years, but look at what has happened in 4 weeks.
Yes.
As somebody who is of color and who has chosen this place as my home, it affects me at the very molecular level of my existence. And I'm not going to, take it lying low. So what do? Well, we also preach spirituality in social work.
Yes.
If prayer works for you, if meditation works for you, go ahead and use it. There was a time in Liberia when the murder was so high with the civil war that a bunch of women got together, and they said the reason they were getting together in Liberia was to pray the devil away. Eventually, the warlord Charles Taylor was captured and sent to the International Court at The Hague. He's still in prison. So, if you're spiritual, I would say pray the devil away. If you're meditating, if you're Buddhist, if you're Baha'u'llah, if you're Baha'i, if you are Confucius, if you're Taoist, if you're Christian, if you're Muslim, pray the devil away if that works for you.
Yes.
Those of us have, here have what we refer to as the bully pulpit. The only way we can pray the devil away is to inform. And so I'm going to be using the instruments I have to inform, to educate, to uncover this issue. And remember that, like in 1939, Mark Moeller, who was the reverend, had a certain quote. He said, "If you do nothing, if you are indifferent in the presence of oppression, you have taken the side of the oppressor." This was by Desmond Tutu. But Martin Moeller went further. He said, first, they came for the trade unionist. I didn't do anything because I wasn't a trade unionist. They came for the Jews. I didn't do anything because I was a Jew. They came for the socialist. I didn't do anything because I wasn't a socialist. When they came for me, there was nobody to speak for me.
Yes.
So here we are, Martin Moeller, and we are going to fight.
Yes, I love this. I love this. You guys, we already got two main takeaways from Dr. Ogbuagu here. He says, number one, get your spiritual life together. If you meditate on things that you would like to see in the world, you meditate on it's a fight here, the good and the evil. That's what this fight is about. And so use your spiritual gifts. We are all people of color. We got spiritual gifts. And this is the time to get into your meditation. This is the time to get into your praying power, whatever it is. This is time to get in. So that's one way to join the resistance. We already got one. The second one is that Dr. Ogbuagu talked about is inform. You need to inform people. Use your voice to be an instrument to stand up to the resistance. Stand up and be a part of the resistance. So we already got two here with Dr. Ogbuagu, who is saying silence means you're taking, you're allowing. Silence means yes, you approve of this. Yeah. So if you're not approving of this, this is where you take to vocalizing something. Yeah. Get into your spirituality and vocalize. I love that, Dr. Buster. Thank you so much.
Yeah, and just one word.
Yes.
November 3rd, 2026 is midterm elections.
Yes.
You can resist by voting and voting for the right people.
Yes. So part of the resistance is getting engaged with the political process. And I'm sorry, I know there's a lot of people who want to say, listen, I don't even want to participate in this political process for very valid reasons. But I want to say is that, first of all, it's your civic duty. Secondly, if you're not interested in politics, to me, that sounds like a fish being uninterested in water. What sense does that make? You have to take your head up out of the sand and see what's going on in the world. And part of it is to exercise your civic duty by voting. I am in favor of that, particularly local elections, but we also have a midterm election that we can put our voice. We can do our spirituality stuff, but we can also go to the polls and we can exercise our options. And it doesn't have to be presidential candidates. There's local elections and, semi-local elections and statewide elections that, that require this from us. So I'm going to hear we're going to go down to Mr. Cleo Manago. And how about you weigh in on this? Tell us what you think about how we can become part of the resistance. And I haven't really heard from you about your political perspective, but today is the day where we can just kind of talk about what we could do if we don't like what we're seeing.
Is it possible for the noisy person to mute because it's a really loud noise?
Mm-hmm. Who is it? Is it?
Uh-oh, I don't hear anything suddenly. Everybody's muted, including you, Alicia. We're all muted.
Yeah, I muted myself just to make sure we don't have a background noise. Go ahead.
Okay. Oh, well, you brought up, first of all, thank you for inviting me to your show. I really appreciate it. And it's nice meeting the sisters and brothers who are here. All of you, thank you. And it's great being in good company and amongst other smart people. You said something a moment ago, Alicia, about my political perspective. I'm going to conflate political perspective and behavioral concerns and cultural concerns all together. During the, and I'm going to be very abbreviated because of time. So if you need me to expand on anything, just ask me and I promise I will. During the Kamala Harris Biden election, not Biden, Kamala Trump election process, there was a lot of impatience with each other. I'm talking about on the so-called Democratic Party side, the so-called left side, the so-called side where Black people traditionally vote. There was a lot of impatience, desperation, and inadvertent abuse between each other. For example, if a Black man said, I have questions about Kamala, and I witnessed this with my own eyes, you're a sexist, you're a misogynist, you're hateful, you just don't support women being in leadership. And I've seen people go in on some of these podcasts on a Black male in particular, if they had questions about Kamala.
Yeah.
What should have occurred, and this is part of my solution here, is that there should have been, instead of being so impatient and in my opinion, falsely rising Kamala up to deity, there should have been a conversation with that brother, like, why do you feel the way you feel? What are your concerns? Why are you apprehensive? And that rarely occurred.
Yes.
Even among people who have high profile platforms, they were like, you're stupid if you don't support Kamala. You were stupid if you do anything that's going to lead us into Trump. And there was this name calling. And one of the things I always say to my staff is that we work with a predominantly Black population. We cannot re-traumatize people. We cannot be abusive. We can't, and we need to be thoughtful about the fact that we live in a society that already implies that we have lesser value than somebody else.
Yes.
And we've already seen in broad daylight the murder of Black people by police in 4K. And we've seen a pattern of people getting away with abusing Black people to the point of death, including twice that we know on a large scale in New York, where one man was dancing at a gas station, he was murdered, and the young man that was on who mimicked Michael Jackson, who was on the subway, was murdered, and his murderer got away. So my point to you is that we live in a pre-traumatized context.
Yes.
And sometimes that unresolved generational trauma leads us to defensiveness and the old phenomena of misdirected rage, or hurt people hurt people. So because we're dealing with a disproportionate unresolved issue of hurt people, we get to an election as severe as this one, and we're not even able to have relaxed, thoughtful engagement, conversations about our difference. Dr. Buster mentioned earlier before we got on the air, about his dislike for the Democratic Party. And he contrasted how and I'm paraphrasing, he can correct me if you like, but he said that the Republican Party seems more focused, they're more unified, and the Democratic Party is splintered. Well, that's because the Republican Party are not fighting with each other. They're not abusing each other. They're like, look, we're white people. We want white power. We want white control. Whether you don't like me because of my sexuality, whether you grab women's private parts and a sexist rapist, long as white power is your agenda, I'm going to support you. On the Democratic side, it's like, if you don't agree with me, F you. Or you're stupid. And then there's one of the problems that the Democratic Party has that the Republican Party doesn't have, is that there's racism in the Democratic Party as well. But can't nobody say it. We have to act like we all get along, which is artificial. So we're always on the verge of implosion because we won't let the dust settle and have functional conversations about our differences. I believe that if these young men who are concerned about Kamala or didn't trust her were told rationally, first of all, why do you think the way you think? Can I hear what you have to say? And then somebody said in the midst of a calm conversation, well, these are the benefits of voting for Kamala, blah, 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 blah. Instead of you're stupid, you're sexist, you don't support women. And I mean, I saw a lot of that. Getting back to your concern regarding solutions, one of the solutions, as I already said, is that we acknowledge that we are in a traumatized context where we have to treat each other better, where we have to listen to each other. We have to make it a safe place to be in each other's presence. And if we don't clear the air from these pre-traumatized contexts, we're going to wind up imploding and not listening. And finally, we have to be more intentional regarding our children. Our children, I'm telling you, I talk to them all the time. Half my staff is in their 20s, and they don't know what's going on.
Yeah.
The curriculum that they're given is, baby, go to school, get a good education, and go to church. They're not told to have a critical analysis about the landscape in which they're in from a political perspective. They're not taught to admit that white supremacy mythology is a saturated poison in the culture. They're taught to go along to get along. So when they see people like Trump, they're in the headlight and they don't even know how to resist.
Yeah.
But some of them are more angry at Black people because of misdirected rage than they are racism. And finally, because a lot of people feel like Blackness has not worked because I'm still getting killed, I'm still hurting, they want to get paid instead. And believe it or not, Donald Trump, with all of his baggage, is considered the get paid president. So people who are just focused on capitalism and money, they're not necessarily bothered by his racism because they're used to racism. And it's got to finish saying that cops has been killing us, vigilantes have been killing us. There's all kinds of discrimination that happens in the culture that creates harm, and that has not been resolved by either party. So I'm gonna go get paid. And
what a dilemma!
To get paid, president. I'm not saying that's how Cleo Monago feels. I'm telling you, is that how that's how they're seeing things, and they want to get paid.
You know, you mentioned two things here that I'm taking big notes here because I think it's so astute. You know, I think we're so quick to dismiss people. And not really hear, like when you come, okay, so I will say I did notice some sexist comments from some of the Black men, honestly, but how you deal with it is not to call somebody sexist. You know, when I'm in therapy and I'm having clients here and I see a man, it doesn't have to be a man, it could be the wife or the husband who is really aggressive and very belligerent. You know, as a therapist, I don't say you are belligerent, you need to cut it out. Like, that's not what I'm saying. I just say, listen, tell me where this comes from, a source of pain. How is it? What is your relationship with this person? What is this reminiscent of? Like, we do need to take a page of that instead of calling people names and putting people down, is to connect with what they are experiencing. Because I really do think and had the impression that I felt like Kamala Harris, and of course I identified with her because I felt like people were taking out their issues about women onto her. But to deal with that is not to point that out, is to try to listen to feel what is coming up for you in her discussion. Because there were some things about, I remember I was talking to Boyce about it. He put something up on his page where he was very critical of Michelle Obama, saying Michelle Obama was telling Black men who to vote for. And if you don't vote for it, I said, it didn't sound like she was telling them. It sounded like an invitation. So my question was, how did you hear an invitation to vote in this particular way? Because that's her job. That's her job to help campaign. That's what people who are campaigning and helping people campaign, that's what you do. You tell people, vote for me. It was more of an invitation, but what he heard and what a lot of other Black men heard was, you better vote for me, or you better vote for her. But that wasn't the words that she said. And I thought it was a wonderful teachable moment where I was just like, and I remember being baffled, like, I don't see I'm not seeing what you're saying. Like, I'm seeing an invitation where it came across as you need to do this. And I think that's an illustration of many of the missed opportunities for on both parts to listen to each other that was not happening. So thank you. I think 1, 2, 3, 4. My fourth, we got some really good chunks of information here, is to take some time out, slow this down a little bit, and listen. And empathetic listening requires not only listening to what people are saying, but understanding the underline of this, the undercurrent of this, because in that undercurrent, right now, we see white people fighting white people, but we don't see where any of our issues are really taken into account here. And will it ever be? You know, we have to now pick who's it going to be, this one or that one. But whatever it is, we still got Black men being murdered in the streets. And I think that's very astute.
I'd like to say something really quickly, because I know that Dr. Cris wants to speak, but you mentioned that you did see misogyny. And I want to be real clear. I saw misogyny and I saw sexism too, and I see it all the time. But one of the stepbrothers of this dysfunction that we almost never hear about is misandry.
Yes.
And there's misandrous concerns and anxiety happening among these men who hear with their emotions, who hear defensively, who have an unconscious fear of being recastrated.
Yes. Oh.
And recastration in terms of anxiety and paranoia about that is real and justifiable in this society. It is not illusions of their imagination. There are real things that we can point to with data and science and everything else that shows the social castration of Black men unresolved for centuries now.
Yes.
And that echo in the midst of this terror makes people jump. Like what you did, what I think you just experienced when you heard a brother hear something different from Michelle other than what she was intending. They're defensive, but their defensiveness is not delusional. Watching Black men get murdered in broad daylight and their killer goes home to have popcorn that evening is traumatizing. And we live in a society where Black men are already concerned about not being a man and not being seen as a man, because this is a patriarchal society that's never valued Black men's capacity to be a quote unquote man. So this perpetual castration that's been unresolved in terms of the traumatic impact causes people to be defensive. It causes domestic violence. It causes dismissiveness of women when they come a certain way, and sometimes just generally because of misogyny. But if you come a certain way to a brother, it's like, no. And Kamala had a lot of things going on with her that made a lot of Black men feel like she's not for me.
Yeah.
So I'm not gonna get paid.
Yeah, for her to be a prosecutor in California didn't go over well. I mean, it's the nature of the job. Like, I worked for DCFS. At one point, my job was to take kids away. You know, and I guess I could run for a political office and someone could say, well, you took the kids away. I'm like, that was my job. My job was to make sure kids were safe versus being, I don't want any false negatives or false positives. That was my job, was to make an assessment and to follow the guidelines there. I was carrying out policy that was given to me. Like, I was part of that team of people who made that very tough decision, but someone could easily say that about me, you know?
The white husband exacerbated the perspective of rejection. Let's be clear. The white husband exacerbated the perception of rejection and not giving a blankety blank about me as a Black man. I'm going to go get paid or vote for Trump, or I'm going to do what 80 million people did and not vote. 80 million people said, I'm not doing this.
They didn't even do. But I think now we're starting to see, and I'm going to go to Chris now before I circle back around to Buster, because I know he got, okay, Dr. Buster, let's let Dr. Buster talk for a second.
I heard everything that Cleo mentioned, and I agree that when one is down, they don't need to be their teeth kicked in. However, we also have to empathize with the people who are this upset, because they are saying that the competition is one of the most horrible human beings that can ever exist.
Yes.
So why are we not questioning him to the extent we are questioning this other person? And either way, the Black man loses, because either way he is going to be castrated. Look at all the people who were jostling for VP under Trump. He didn't even give them any position, even in the cabinet. So they have also been doubly castrated. So the black man is between the rock and a really very hard place.
Mm-hmm.
And these are immanent from the historical antecedents of slavery, where they were in the field and they were dispensable, even as the white man shared children by his spouse. So what do we do? Maybe the black man needs to come ask himself because the black man is not benefiting anything from Trump.
Absolutely not. Yes.
You know?
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's go in for Dr. Cris. Weigh in. What some answers? I think you got some background noise, but that's okay. Your voice is more important than background noise.
Mute us. Mute
okay,
me.
I'll mute you guys. Okay.
All right, let me know if there's more noise. I'll see what I can do. Again, as always, Alicia, thank you, Dr. Alicia, for having me on. I always enjoy these times with you. And it's good to also meet Dr. Cleo and be again here with Dr. Buster. I really am enjoying the topics that they've brought up, these issues. They're very real. And I think they deserve a lot more discussion. That being said, I'm gonna go back to your original question for a minute about what's happening, and particularly want to go back to one of the chat comments that was here that was presented at the beginning of our call, which is a lot and it's fast. What I want to remind people is that was purposeful. That's a tactic. That's a real tactic that they're using. They're trying to overwhelm us to the point that we will just back off and crawl in a corner, basically. We can't do that. And the way that the first step that you can take when you are receiving all of this information, because like as Dr. Buster was saying, that's one of our first lines of defense. I'm talking to anybody who will listen. Let me tell you what's happening. Have you paid attention? If not, no problem. I'm going to tell you. But it's overwhelming. I've gotten that response from the people in my social circle, the people in my family. It's very overwhelming to hear. I personally even was overwhelmed. But that is the point that we have to remember, is that is the tactic, to do everything very fast and do everything quickly, so that even the media, not social media, but the regular media cannot even keep up. They gotta be, which story, which priority are we gonna address today? Because there's been three major things. So I want to address that, and I want to say, like, the first thing is, I think that's going to be a very common reaction by all of us. You get all of this information and it elicits a lot of emotions. Fear is a big one. Anxiety is another one, because I go back to just the basis of what makes us strong. What is the backbone of mental health for us? Structure, stability. Structure's gone or is being eliminated as we speak. Stability, as a result of that structure being not decomposed, but be deconstructed, is then leading to this instability. So anyone who is paying attention, who is seeing what's going on, those basic foundational elements of who we are as a person are rocked. I can't talk about structure in the way, well, oh, the Constitution said this, the law said that. That's gone. That's been gone, right, for the last month. And because that structure is gone, the stability, is chaotic. There is no stability. It's hard to even predict and strategize within your own life, right? Like, how am I going to move forward? What actions am I going to take or not take? Is very difficult when you have so many elements of unknown, and we can't predict anymore because we're in new times. Help me out, because I'm not a political scientist either. But
what you're saying, hold on, I'm going to mute you for a second. But yeah, what you're saying makes sense. And there's a that is a tactic, what you're talking about. And I'm trying to look up the word as you were talking. There's a word for it. And the word is blitzkrieg, and it means lightning war. And so it is a tactic that's made, the Nazi Germany did. And there's an analyst, her name is Lori Weiner. Y'all look her up. She studied Hitler. She said it took Hitler 57 days to collapse the institution of democracy in Germany. And she's been talking about this and warning people about this for a very long time. And everyone said this will never happen in America. America is not Germany because we have checks and balance. There will be resistance. There'll be people in office that will slow Donald Trump down. That's what they told her. And it's going faster than most people think. And so that is very interesting that you bring that up, because it's an old tactic there. And you should look her up because she has given beautiful parallels to what's happening between Hitler and what Donald Trump is doing today. I think that is so brilliant. So let me ask everybody in the chat, y'all, let me tell you, so far we got 6 pieces of advice on how to join the resistance, how to become part of the resistance. We got get your spirituality and meditation together. Check. Put a 1 in if y'all going to be working on that. Number 2, inform and be informed with instruments to have a chance to talk about and uncover. Do not stay silent. Yes. Oh, thank you. The K is silent. I don't know. Blitzkrieg. I don't know. I can't speak German, but yeah. Thank you, Black Lexicon. I could always count on Black Lexicon. 2, be informed and inform other people. Do not stay silent. Number 3, November 3rd, 2026. Come on, exercise your rights here to vote. Number 4, which is what Cleo Monago talked about, making sure we're listening. This is trauma. We got to have to a place of healing. We all going to need some healing there. That's number 4, really listening and really thinking about even more, I would say 5, about, I really think that Trump really is a representation and really garnished the support of people who do have unhealed trauma. Because a lot of people identify with his way of acting, because his way of being is definitely, it probably feels familiar for some people on an unconscious level. It feels familiar because it is something that is abusive. It is quite abusive. So people who are comfortable with abuse will feel that. So we need to raise awareness of that dynamic. And definitely, Cris is saying, pay attention of these tactics that are happening. And I think it's really interesting. I really did think that there would be some stops in place, but there wasn't. I mean, he went against, if we're getting court hearings saying you need to do a certain thing, and none of this is, and he's not following what the courts say, he's not following what Congress, that's impeachable.
It's in the playbook.
Yeah.
It's in the playbook. It was actually authored by Steve Bannon.
Yes.
Inundate. And of course, because Donald Trump has a malignant narcissistic personality disorder, he has strength, enormous stamina to keep reeling it. And all the people who constructed Project 25, which began before Reagan, actually, are the ones who are in charge. So they know what triggers the confusion. So it's in the playbook.
Yeah, it's definitely in the playbook. And go ahead, Cleo. You want to add something? Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay, I'm almost 70 years old. I've been Black for heading toward a century now, and African and all Negro, all the words I want to use. And I have been observant, hardwired to be inquisitive and look at my environment up closely, and even when it was excruciatingly painful, because I came from a dysfunctional family. That was a very difficult place to be as a child. As opposed to escaping and running. I've never been high or drunk in my entire life. I've been fully present the whole time and witnessing the world. And even when it's excruciating, I want to figure it out because I've always had a problem-solving impulse. So I didn't want to leave. I didn't want to run away. I want to say, what's going on here? This is painful. I hope it doesn't last. What can I do to intervene? When I was a little kid, I didn't have that vocabulary, but I had that impulse. And the reason why I raised that is because all of my life, Black people have dealt with brutal levels of white supremacy, mythological mayhem and brutality. All of my life. Now I can bore you with all the details, back with the Black Panthers and the guy that used to be the chief of police, Daryl, I forgot his last name, who was the chief of police in LA, where they murdered Black men and women, particularly Black men, for lunch. I mean, all of my life, and how right now to this very day, it's very difficult to turn on television and see a reliable love story between two Black people, and how Black children are not encouraged to engage this or talk about this. I'll tell you a real abbreviated story to make my point. When Dylan Roof shot 12 people and murdered 9, I happened to be on a Black mental health tour in St. Paul, California, a bunch of places. And on the front cover of the Chicago Tribune, which you guys should have saw, it had the words forgiveness. You might remember that across the front of the newspaper. And when I got to St. Paul, I spoke to a large group. I was a keynote speaker at a Black mental health conference. And I asked it was full of people. It was like 1,000 people there, predominantly Black, a few white looky-loos. Of course, they're always there. And I asked the audience, I said, can I ask your children a question? And we had been talking for a while, so I had a comfort zone with them. I said, can I ask your children a question? I said, now, if you are uncomfortable with my question, if you don't like it, you can do this, and I be very respectful, and I will not go any further. I said, but do I have your permission to ask your children a question or a series of questions? They said yes. I asked, and the babies were like newborn up to maybe 17. And of course, the newborns know what I was talking about, but the kids that were 5+ knew what I was talking about. And this is when Dylan Roof murders were on a loop in the media. They played it on ABC, CBS, blah, blah, blah. So I asked the babies, I said, do you know who Dylan Roof is? And about, I'll say 30 kids said yes. I said, who is Dylan Roof? They were quiet. Not because they didn't know who Dylan Roof was, but they were looking up their parents. Like, do I have permission to talk? Do I have permission to freely express myself? Because you, my parent, has not invited me to say a word about this. And parents have not invited them to say a word about a lot of things, about the murder of Trayvon Martin, about the blah, blah, blah. They're told to go to school, get a good education, and repress anything that might make white people uncomfortable. I mean, that's really what's going on. Chronic white accommodation syndrome. So a little boy in the back, he might have been like 7, said he killed people. And I said, he killed what kind of people? And they didn't want to say it. They knew it was true because they're not stupid. They're some of the most brilliant babies in the country. But they had a hard time going. And to make a long story short, because a lot happened, but one of the babies said, I don't want to come off mean. I don't want to come off racist. And I said to these babies, telling the truth is not racist. If you articulate that a young white kid went to a Black church and murdered over a dozen people, that's not racist for you to acknowledge that. It's also not racist for you to admit that it hurt and that it frightened you and that it made you feel vulnerable and that you wondered why. And I'm telling you right now, half the kids, particularly the boys, started bawling. They started crying. So the point I'm making in saying all of that is that our directions on talking with each other, spirituality, so and so, will not necessarily connect if people are in an unresolved trauma trance.
Unresolved trauma trance, yes.
And over half the Black population is in an unresolved white supremacy induced trauma trance. And we are, and so that's why our children are so busy not knowing what to do, because they're sitting all this stuff that they have a logical concern about, because it's natural to be concerned about such issues where they're told, shh, go to school, baby. Shh, go to church, baby. Shh, get a good job, baby. Shh, get a weave. Become middle class, baby. Go to an HBCU, baby. Don't have no conversation. And I'll close this long rant by saying that phenomena of not being used to being in functional dialogue surfaced during the Kamala Trump election process, because we still were not having conversations with each other, and because we haven't been trained to. So part of my suggestion is not only acknowledge trauma, but learn how to navigate past it to the point of functional interaction as people who are dealing with a adversarial culture that's anti-Black.
You know, this is so beautiful, because I was just listening on NPR today about University of Chicago did this study where all they did was put all of the inner city kids that were there, they put them in group therapy and compared them to a control group. And I graduated from University of Chicago, so I know they love doing stuff like that. Believe it or not, the Black kids who were in group therapy and followed this program, all they did was sit down and talk about what was going on with them, had a reduction of 50% less likely to be arrested, to kill each other. The cure for Black on Black crime in the inner city Chicago, believe it or not, is group therapy. And they said 2 years after they finished the program, they still those
but it's true.
Stagnant all the way through 2 years ago. We knew it doesn't cost a lot of money. I'm way cheaper. I'm way cheaper than all of these.
And Dr. Alicia, to add to what Cleo had said, I was a colonial subject, British imperialism.
Yes.
By the time I got to my 12th grade, I had so many lashes because I spoke my language. I was forced to speak the Queen's English, not mix my tenses. I went to a grammar school. And by the time I was in my 8th grade, I had been made to memorize European history, literature, and was able to recite all the 12 works of Shakespeare without missing them. And this was my lived experience as a child. And we grew up not teaching our children to speak my language, because that's the trauma we have internalized.
Yes.
So when the Queen Elizabeth died, people were saying, oh, nice woman. I said, no, she should have died earlier because of the trauma that she imposed upon us. 2 million people were murdered by British weaponry.
Children.
And there were children who come during church services with British fighter jets, Russian MiG-19, and strafe and bomb churches. I saw my sister still had a shrapnel in her thigh before she died. Some of my classmates were blown to smithereens. And that was why I became a child soldier at the age of 10. And now you want me to acknowledge and be in sympathy with my oppressor, which was the Queen Elizabeth, who was the Queen of England, when she handed over weapons to Nigerian soldiers to kill us. And then I can't mention it. It's like what's happening now. If you go to Nigeria, every Nigerian who says they are Christian, the only one God they have is the God of Israel. But Israel doesn't have the God of Israel. Israel has its own intellectualism and weaponry. And then we were supposed to keep quiet when 15,000 Palestinians were being slaughtered. And if we were to say something, we were anti-Semitic. And I said, heck no. I don't care who you are. If you're killing 50,000 people, you need to stop. And we need not give you weapons to continue to murder people and commit genocide, because I experienced genocide. So here, we are not allowed to speak. I remember when I came from Canada here, Dr. Billy Terrell, my mentor, came from the South, Mississippi. So when I talk about racism or white supremacy, she was like, did he say that? And I said, yeah, I did. I did. And then, of course, yeah, and now I'm still speaking.
Yes.
How am I if I hear a British accent, I get re-traumatized.
Yeah.
And I have tried everything to wipe out any iota. I don't write British English. I refuse to write it because of what it did to me. And my 2 million people, mostly children.
Yes. And that's a
So
normal response.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Cleo.
So what you're recrystallizing is the phenomena of trauma.
Yeah.
Also the phenomena of attempting to have a life, attempting to eat and live and breathe and prosper, with that still being a trigger in your psyche because it was so painful.
Yeah.
And what we've been trained to do through this stuff is wind up acting out on each other because there's these triggers that we don't even know. I mean, at least you know that you went through academic anti-Black trauma through Shakespearean forced, curriculum. But a lot of our children don't even know.
Oh.
And then there's the N word. And you know what I'm talking about, Dr. B. That implies on a normal basis a level of normalized humanization that we have normalized through daily language, which is a re-traumatization on a daily basis. So while people are getting ready to vote, Dr. Alicia, and while that's an important recommendation, simultaneously we have to do de-traumatization work and helping people to locate their triggers, because a lot of Black on Black crime is really misdirected rage at racism. A lot of domestic violence. I was called to go to Johannesburg way back as soon as we were allowed following apartheid, and there was an epidemic of child abuse and domestic violence. Black men acting out on their children and acting out on women. And when I got there, there was all this anti-African male talk conversation, and a lot of women were pissed off at men, which I understand. Who wants to be abused? But what I brought in there, I said, let me tell you something. Those men were boys for generations. Boys. Castrated boys for generations, and they couldn't even talk about it without their life being in danger. So they did something dysfunctional, but unfortunately relatively frequent among human beings. They went home and they wanted power somewhere, some control somewhere, and they didn't have their capacity to nurture and love was being beat out of them to the point of feeling like, this is making me vulnerable. F that, I'm kicking somebody's ass. And they couldn't quote unquote kick the white man's ass, so they kicked the children's ass and they kicked their wives. And what I helped to do, exactly, displacement. What I helped to do, thank goodness, not in every case, I wasn't successful in every case, but I helped those women and those men learn to talk with each other and understand what each other were living with in each other's journey, instead of being so mad at each other. Because the women were mad at the men for not being men, in quotes.
Yeah.
The men were mad at the women for not being able to even understand what they were going through, and to feel castrated and less than in their presence. So they want to fight and be, macho. And it was this misdirected rage just going insane. But I was able to navigate them past hearing each other's journey. And they both were shocked. They were living in the same homes, all under apartheid, but had never thought about the fact that we're in crazy pain because we went through an inhuman, intergenerational slaughter of our humanity. And we don't even know how to speak rehumanization. We don't know the language of we don't know the language of reclamation of being Africans. And I was able to help with that. I'm so glad I got that opportunity.
I want to go to Dr. Chris.
And of course, this man came from the diamond mines of Kimberley and Witwatersrand, carrying HIV.
Oh my God!
Carrying HIV, and then they will come home, even though they knew they had HIV. They forced their spouses to have unprotected sexual intercourse, leading to the spread of HIV and AIDS in South Africa. Because there is a power, of course, they were boxed away in the Bantustans. And because they were boxed away, they were also doubly boxed away into the gold mines where they stayed for months.
Oh.
So that was a double whammy for them. And of course, they were disempowered completely to the extent that the only way they found power was in the home. And who bore the brunt of the power that they never had? Of course, it was their spouses, it was their children. And that's why, for me, the moment I find that I'm being threatened, and I think to myself, I'm not going to take this trauma home. I had one of my supervisors when I was in Ottawa in child protection. Yes, I took kids away too. He was Dutch, and he felt he had more power than me. So I called him and I said, listen, I'll tell you something. And I called him by his name and I said, you are a white man who was Dutch. You spoke no English when you came to Canada. But because you're a white man, you are my supervisor. But listen, I am not going to internalize the trauma you want to inflict on me and take it home. So beware that any day you bring me into your office and you mess up, somebody's not going to be leaving this office. And that's not going to be me. So, and to that extent, my style is to confront it where it is. So I don't internalize and take home.
So, but that's going to take a lot of courage.
Yes.
And
yeah, because
I don't know if y'all know, but Dr. Buster, his office is right next to mine. So his courage just seeps over into my office too, to speak up because you feel so isolated. Yes. And when you do talk, who's there to listen?
But you see, I also have privilege as a Black man from Africa.
Yes.
I didn't have ancestors who told me about the harrowing experiences of slavery.
Yes.
I was born free, ostensibly. I only experienced colonialism, which was excruciating. Multiply that by a factor of 1 million to the history that was handed down by word of mouth. Whew. Over 403 years.
All right. So, hey, everybody, I want to go to Dr. Cris. Cris, come with your thoughts here on this wonderful topic. We are talking about becoming part of the resistance. And I'm talking about a study I heard on NPR. I'm going to look it up at the University of Chicago about having group therapy. So let's just call this group therapy so that we don't go and hurt nobody. Talking about group therapy, it had the lasting effects of having a place to voice ourselves, to be part of this resistance through our voice, through our messaging, how we interact with each other. I do want to read, there was a letter from mental health therapists. There was over 200 and counting one letter that was endorsed by hundreds of mental health therapists about the mental decline of Donald Trump. Before I do that, I want to talk to Dr. Cris here. Tell us any thoughts you have about what we're talking about here today. So far, I got 7 tips on what to do to cope with some of this change that is really frightening for many of us. Anything you'd like to contribute to this conversation? Oh, wait, hold on. Let me unmute you. Okay, go ahead, Cris.
Thank you, Dr. Alicia. I mean, I love what Dr. Buster, Dr. Cleo have been saying, because it is so important to recognize the fact that people, not just people, but a large population of our community has been traumatized in the past. So, but to be, to go from there and be real, try to give some real active or specific steps that people can take. I think one is, first of all, like I said, you're getting information purposely, like a fire hose coming at you, right? So it's okay. Take a breath, take the time, prioritize that information. But then at that point, this is an important time for you to reach out to your community. Use what Dr. Buster, Dr. Cleo was saying about having those conversations with other people that may not have the same perspective you do. but it could be a rich conversation. We need the community at this time. This is not a time that we can be alone and try to resist on our own. And part of that is taking care of ourselves, and being healthy mentally and emotionally. So reach out to your local communities that are resisting, whether it's local Black Panthers, local ACLU, whatever you can find that's comfortable for you. You need the community right now. This is not a time to sit by yourself and try to resist. Understand, for those people that do like to be by themselves, there are ways that you can get involved. But most of all, as you get involved, this is a marathon. This is not a sprint. So it's very important that you take care of yourself. Self-care is huge, whether it's like what Dr. Buster was saying, with spirituality, meditation, whatever it is that brings you relaxation, that brings you back to the parasympathetic system, because let me tell you, we read these things and we might just be sitting here and we might be feeling the emotions, but also what's happening inside of our bodies is cortisol. Cortisol is just running because we're stressed when we hear these things. And what's happening is we read them, we see what's happening, and we have a fight or flight response. And that's real from a psychobiological perspective. So it's very important. Find your community and up your self-care right now.
And I would like to also add that, remember that every problem has an expiration date.
Yes.
He says he's mooting that he wants to run a third term. We will see. But the thing is this: if the other political party gains the 2 houses, he is already a lame duck. So it doesn't matter what he throws, it's not going to work. But if it doesn't happen, remember that self-preservation is mortal's chiefest enemy. So remember that this problem has an expiration date. One day he's going to be gone. Andrew Jackson went a long time ago, but look at where he is on the fruit, on the sands of history. Eventually, your children and your grandchildren are going to be reading history where it says there was a time in the dark ages of the United States. So remember that you come first. Self-preservation is mortal's chiefest enemy, because most people do not know how to self-preserve. This problem has an expiration date after you've done everything.
I agree with you. Can I? I don't want to talk.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead. Mm-hmm.
I agree with you, Dr. B. But I want to underscore a contrast that you made earlier. You mentioned that as a person from the continent, though you dealt with colonialism, you didn't have the direct, perpetual, institutionalized dehumanization of you as a human being as law, like we had in the United States for several hundred years. And one thing I like about going to the continent, and you already know this, you can go to a impoverished area and the children still have a certain level of joy. They still have big smiles on their face. They still have a certain level of exuberance while in their bodies, even if they're dirt poor. That rich Black people don't even have it in the United States of America, because we don't know what life is like simply being fine in our Black African bodies. We are trained that you're ugly, your hair, your nose, you're too Black, act your age, not your color, all these, sit your Black ass down, all these perpetual, and the N-word, the N-word, which doesn't exist in Africa unless they're copying hip hop culture like the African Americans. There's not even any equivalent of a self-destructive term that came directly from the oppressor that's used joyously every day in love songs like we have in this country. So I say that because, again, while we're giving recommendations, I think foundationally we need to ask people to self-evaluate. We need to ask people to come up with and that's our job, to give them a checklist on what health and well-being might look like and what it does not look like. Because people need guidance. People need Black/African affirmation guidance and a map on how to love yourself anyway, despite this country's implications. Because one of the things that I didn't mention earlier, during those sessions I had with these children and their parents, I asked the young people, did your parents invite you to talk about the Dylann Roof incident? And all of them said no. None of their parents, and their parents loved them. It wasn't like their parents didn't like them. Their parents were ambitious, trying to make it, but we have been trained to be industrial strength white accommodationists. I mean, no matter what.
I've seen really, that's neglect. In a sense, that's neglect. Like in a way, it's a form of neglect.
Yeah,
it is
a very nasty, powerful thing.
But also, it was aimed to protect them, even when there is no protection for them.
Yes. And it is neglect, but as you already know, Dr. Alicia, it's not intentional neglect. It's habitual neglect. It's culturally imposed by making white people good. Like if you've seen that film, that movie, The Maid, about the time the maid got home from nursing and loving the white children all day, she was just too done to take care of her own children. She had to go to bed, so they were left neglected. But not because she continued to neglect them. She was spent by being in the gauntlet of white supremacy mythology. So as we give these excellent directives, let's invite our people to self-evaluate, to purge the implications or the great potential to have internalized white supremacy disorder and be anti-Black as Black people as a result, and to work from a very intentional and informed by people like us perspective to rebuild themselves as a self-loving African person. Because this society does not do that. Like I said before, I mean, I've done work with children and I ask them, tell me about a love story, and it's always white folks. Romeo and Juliet, blah, 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 blah. I said, tell me a love story that's very popular, that's in popular culture, that you watch every day or you can watch every week, that features two Black people that adore and love each other. And it's like crickets.
You don't see it.
Well, they don't see it. They can't find it.
They don't. Yeah.
And just imagine being a baby, a Black baby who's hungry, who's looking, who's inquisitive, who never sees Black on Black love.
Yeah.
Particularly in comparison to all the white on white love that's everywhere like roaches. So I'm saying, I'm not trying to make white on white love bad. I'm saying that there's an imbalance that we have to admit. Those parents, those parents.
I want to jump in. I want to jump in real quick.
And before you go, we are raised to respect, to maintain white fragility. So we don't upset them, and then they will have to stand us in the corner. And then because of that, also over the years, the moment a Black person speaks, the white person says he's angry, she's angry. Look at her voice, she's belligerent. And I say, yes, I am angry. And usually they'll say, is that a threat? I say, yeah, it is. So it's time for us to
say this.
So we don't continue to maintain white fragility and become the object that is being accused of creating white fragility. The white man decides to be fragile. That's their business.
That's their business. That's their issue.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm speaking of neglect. I don't want to neglect my daughter. I gotta go pick her up, but she's only 5 minutes away. Y'all, why don't y'all keep this conversation going? Y'all too. I got it. I got stuff I want to say too, if you want to, but I gotta go. I don't want to neglect my child. My son would go get her, but he's doing homework and my daughter's washing her hair. Yeah. So, and Dr. Boyce isn't here.
Let's take a rain check.
You want to take a rain check? Okay. I didn't know what y'all want to do, but I know I want to neglect my daughter here. I got to go pick her up like quickly, and she gets real mad at me.
Because, cooperation is a word between one or two or more persons. You cooperate. So if you're not here, it's not going to be complete.
Oh, really? But I got more things to say, but maybe we'll talk. We're going to talk about it in March. So everybody, thank you guys for becoming part of the resistance. we're going to be implementing. I got like 10, 11 ideas here, but I won't repeat them because I got to go. Rain check. Okay. Everybody wants, y'all put rain check in the chat and I'll make sure my husband hears it. So maybe he'll be able to come on next time. I didn't get a chance to fight today, so I don't feel comfortable.
Well, we are Geminis. We are used to fight the war.
I know. You got to understand. I'm a Gemini. Dr. Buster's a Gemini. My husband's a Gemini. That's 6 people right there. And then so I don't know what you are, Cleo. It's your zodiac sign. But we're going to continue. What's your zodiac?
They claim I'm a Virgo.
Oh, yes, love you some Virgos. Oh my gosh. And of course, Chris is a Taurus, the bull. So, but anyway, we have got to wrap up before my child be all mad at me. But anyway, I'm gonna keep this going. Next month, we're gonna reach out, we're gonna continue this conversation because I got more to say about this resistance. I didn't even get to really talk about what I thought we should do, but we'll hold on to it till next week. Goodbye, everybody.
Hi, my brother. Bye.
Don't forget, reach out to me.
You better keep in touch. I'm coming after you.
Okay. Text love to 87948 to get updates on when we're going to have the next part of this in March. Sometime in March, we will talk. All right. Goodbye, everybody.
Goodbye. Bye-bye.
Take care.
Wait, I can't end. What's going on? Okay.